It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? Hello. Today is March 7th, 2023, and we are about to dig into the news. Oops, this isn't the tab I wanted. This is the one that I have towards the end. Um, but there's a lot going on today and lots that we can talk about. So thank you so much for being here. As always, we're going to do a new thing where if you like one of these stories, please comment that you like it and which story it is and put this timestamp in the YouTube comments. Thank you so much for doing that. It really does help other people connect to these stories. A Chinese comedian, Chi has online profiles wiped after Canadian tour wrapped up. So this is kind of interesting. I guess this is a stand-up comedian. It looks like here that he might have dreadlocks. Wow, very controversial. And they have been wiped clean off of major mainland Chinese social media. So Wang Yuqi, a stand-up comic from China, wrapped up his North American tour in Toronto last month. Ironically, the main theme running through his shows is China's heavy censorship of its cultural industry. Interesting. Dennis Zhao, who posted a picture of himself with Cheesy on Huahongshu, a Chinese Instagram-like lifestyle app, said the comic looked fine when they met on Sunday. However, the post was taken down by the social media platform less than 24 hours later. So the interesting thing for me here is that so many comedians in North America, they're always crying like, oh my god, they're trying to cancel me. Like the woke mob on Twitter is upset because I made a joke about people's like fundamental human rights, and now they're trying to cancel me, and I can't believe I'm getting another Netflix special as a result of this, and I'm hosting SNL, and like they're still trying to cancel me, and I'm making all this money, and I'm one of the richest people in the world, and I can't believe they're trying to cancel me. I'm like, well, maybe they're not trying to cancel you in the same way, and this is kind of a more concrete example of someone being canceled, because it turns out in order to cancel someone, you actually need to have power. And people on Twitter tend to not have as much institutional power as the state in this case. So people are describing Cheesy's show as brave and sincere. Objectively speaking, his jokes didn't go that far, but given the environment for public opinions in today's China, he probably had seen the consequences coming. So he maybe knew that this was something that was going to happen. Obviously, you can't make fun of China, I guess, not if you want to be a Chinese citizen or especially a public figure. If you're going to make fun of China, you should definitely do it like whispering to your neighbors or your family members. If you're a Chinese citizen, sure, we can make some fun of China here, but we also don't want to be xenophobic, which is a theme that has been stretching across the news in recent memory. So Cheesy's fate is just the latest in a Chinese Communist Party-led campaign against cultural celebrities who cross the lines, said Deanna Fu, an associate professor of political science at the University of Toronto. It also elicits a feeling that one should not even listen to sensitive subjects such as human rights, even in comedy. So interesting that you can use comedy for championing human rights, and in my opinion, that's the kind of correct way to use your art, to use comedy. Unfortunately, there is a trend in North America. I'm looking at you, Dave Chappelle, where people do not really use their comedy for those purposes, and they kind of punch down. And it's nice to see a story here of somebody who's actually standing up for groups that are being oppressed. In another opinion piece that I read over the weekend, this is from Kai Chang Tom, who is an amazing social activist. They're a writer and a sex educator in Toronto. I believe they are also a trans woman. I once competed, not head to head, in a poetry slam, but as part of the same Canadian poetry slam uh, festival as Kai Chang Tom. So I'm kind of like a fan, I guess you could say. Um, and I just honestly, I just wanted to read the headline in this case: the moral panic over trans rights issues. Sorry, the moral panic over trans rights is a distraction from society's real issues. And honestly, I 100% agree. It is, for one thing, a moral panic. It is something that is not um, creating any systemic harm. And it's just a common thread throughout history. So I'm not going to read this article. I'm not even going to go through it because I think you should consider reading it yourself. It's a great article. And you should follow Kai Chang Tom. I'm just highlighting the things that I love. Why? Because hey, it's my platform, so I get to do what I want. Haha. In other news here in Ontario, Neskantaga First Nation says it wasn't adequately consulted in key Ring of Fire in a key Ring of Fire environmental study. Sometimes it's hard for me to read these headlines because they're not like sentences. Um, but yeah, this First Nation, Neskantaga, was not consulted by the government of Ontario. It's saying, or at least it was not given the adequate like time allotment in order to properly get through the process. And this is kind of just one of those instances where even though they might be trying to do the proper environmental assessments, which are in themselves controversial, there's a compounding effect when it comes to disenfranchised people and oppressed people. So of course it's going to be harder for like a First Nation to respond to these environmental assessments. So Niskantaga First Nation says it wasn't adequately consulted in a key Ring of Fire environmental study and is warning Ring of Fire Metals, the Australian mining company bent on developing the region, that it will have to use force against members of the First Nation before they would allow development. Ontario and two other First Nations, Webeki and Martin Falls, agreed on Monday on terms of reference related to an environmental assessment for the last of the three proposed roads into the Ring of Fire. So some First Nations are agreeing to these new roads, these new developments, and several others, including Neskantaga, are not. So partly because they would be affected by any development in the minerals region located about 550 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay. In a YouTube video on Monday, Neskantaga Chief Wayne Munias said that the First Nation had not provided its consent to the terms of the environmental assessment and vowed to fight against the development. So we do have the YouTube video here. We'll probably watch it after we run through these headlines. But just to summarize what he said a little bit, this is unacceptable. This is something that is very concerning to us and something that the CEO of Ring of Fire Metals needs to know. You're not going to cross our river system without our free, prior, and informed consent, said Chief Munias. You're going to have to kill us. You're going to have to do more than just getting access from the province of Ontario. So really strong words, really strong language. It sounds like this is going to be an instance of land defenders standing up against the province and against the corporations that want to further extract resources from their land. So this is something that we will be following. Purple Mavis in chat is saying that this company has a bad history with Aborigines of Australia, and I'm not surprised by that in the least. So again, something we need to keep following as Ontario moves to develop the Ring of Fire. It's saying here that they had already agreed in 2021, the province, on terms of reference for environmental assessments of two other roads, the first connecting the provincial highway network to Martin Falls and the other joining Webeki to the Ring of Fire. The last of the roads, called the Northern Link, would connect Martin Falls to Webeki and give the operator of the Ring of Fire a direct route to transport mined nickel out of the region. Dylan Moore, spokesperson for George Pyrie, Ontario's Minister of Mines, wrote in an email to the Globe that the duty to consult will be carried out on all proposed Ring of Fire projects and will be subject to Ontario's world-class environmental standards. So, I cannot stress enough that Ontario, that Canada as a whole does not really have a world class standard when it comes to the treatment of its indigenous folks, and the other nations that occupy this land. So definitely some like PR maneuvering here. So Ring of Fire Metals, of course, the company has expressed frustration at the slow pace of obtaining permits in Canada, especially compared to its base in Western Australia. There, mining projects have been put into production in as little as 4 years after being discovered. And now we were reading an article the other day about how it can take 20 years maybe in Canada, maybe 25 years to develop a mine in Canada, which is what they're reaffirming here. Last week, Ontario announced plans to ease red tape regarding mine closure plans and allow easier access to obtain permits to mine minerals from tailings. So they are trying to remove some of this red tape so that companies like this Australian Ring of Fire Metals can get in there, and we can start making lithium batteries in the name of protecting the environment so that we can all purchase expensive electric cars that are manufactured brand new. So I don't know. I have such mixed feelings about this. There is always this pressure under capitalism to exploit the environment, exploit First Nations peoples, in order to save the environment. So there's always a contradiction there, and people will always champion this cause because that is what's popular. And that, my friends, is what we usually call virtue signaling in the name of capitalism. What else do we have here? Oh, yeah. Federal government makes certain historic laws targeting women, LGBTQ community eligible for expungement. So this is a step in the right direction for sure. It doesn't undo the violence and the damage that's already been done, but it is nice to see this sentiment because it is empowering LGBTQ people and women and writing, making an attempt to right the historical wrongs that those communities faced. Now, I love to see this, especially because, as we know, in the U.S. they are doing quite the opposite. So I'm glad to see Canada doing this, even if it doesn't undo the damage, as I said, that's already done. So people convicted under historic indecency and anti-abortion laws will be able to clear their records after the federal government made a string of offenses directed at women and the LGBTQ community eligible for expungement. Indecency offenses dating back to 1892 that targeted the LGBTQ community, including those used to justify police raids on gay clubs and bathhouses, are to be added to the list of historically unjust offenses people can apply to have struck from their record. They include the crime of putting on an immoral, indecent, or obscene play, opera, concert, acrobatic, variety, or vaudeville performance, and publicly exhibiting a disgusting object at a bawdy house. That's the literal language, is a disgusting object. So I don't really like that could refer to like a great number of things. It's like, geez, it's like it could be like the leg of a chair that looks like a phallic. It's like, oh, okay. The reforms will mean that people who were found guilty as recently as 20 years ago, so this is something that is still like in the living memory of people in Canada, can apply to have their convictions erased. And the article does go on here, but unfortunately we have to move on to say that there's also a move here to allow these expungements for people who faced hardship when trying to seek abortions, or in some cases they received those abortions. In many cases they were maybe pushed out of the medical system and forced to perform very dangerous services themselves. So these expungements include doctors and nurses who helped women carry out an abortion, people who helped procure an abortion, or who supplied a drug or noxious thing to carry out an abortion. Again, noxious thing is the actual language here. Abortion has been legal in Canada since 1988, when the Supreme Court decided that a law criminalizing abortion was unconstitutional. Women were convicted of procuring one's own miscarriage can now apply for the offense to be struck from the record as with those convicted for selling or advertising a method for having an abortion. So another victory for I think women and LGBTQ people in Canada. It's great to hear these positive stories, especially with what is going on in the culture war and in the United States, and of course that carries over into Canada, and we have our own problems here. So great to hear that. Um, let's before we get to Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau, let's talk about Doug Ford here. Let's start. We'll go from provincial to federal. Ontario Court of Appeal strikes down Ford government's election ad rules. So if you do remember, Doug Ford and the Conservatives, they used the notwithstanding clause to restrict spending by groups other than political parties before campaigns begin. And now this was largely something that was criticized because it was basically a move that favors the party who's already in power. Go figure. When you're suddenly restricting the amount of advertisements that can be highlighting the problems of the current government, yeah, it does become harder to win those elections when you're basically being censored in a way with the amount that you can say. Now, this is for third parties, and a lot of the criticism is that it's specifically directed towards unions, advocacy organizations, or corporations, and it's something that is potentially limiting their ability to speak out and support the candidates who are going to benefit them. So it is a bit of a mixed bag, like, of course I would support the unions, but maybe I might not support some corporations taking this money. So Premier Doug Ford's 2021 election law, it changes imposed a $600,000 spending limit on what are known as third-party groups. And you have to apply 12 months in advance of the province's official 28-day election campaign period. So if you think about Canadian elections, they're not like American elections. They're not 2 years. They're not 4 years. They're just like 28 days. So the fact that you have to apply 12 months in advance of that 28-day period is like, that's a hell of a long time. That's like 12 times the actual campaign period. So in a ruling released Monday, a 3-judge appeal panel ruled 2-1 that the rules violate the Constitution's guarantees on voting rights, which are among the few rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that governments cannot suspend using the notwithstanding clause. So, of course, Doug Ford is known here for having used the notwithstanding clause or threatening to use it 3 times, and they are the first Ontario government to do so. The decision says the ad rules deny voters access to information and undermine the rights of citizens to meaningfully participate in the political process and to be effectively represented. So, one takeaway from this that I have is that the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, which intervened in the case, welcomed the decision, but lamented that the original rule gave the changes the potential to impact the last election. So yeah, unfortunately, we've already had an election since this notwithstanding clause was used to pass through this anti-democratic legislation, and now they're finally resolving it. And unfortunately, we've already had one election, and Doug Ford won a majority. So it's one of those things, like we talk about Chinese election interference. Well, what about interference from the existing party who's already in power in Ontario? Is that a thing? Is that a thing that we can investigate? And again, it's really hard to prove how these things impact our elections, because it's basically saying, hey, you're only allowed to run so many ads, and of course we know media influences people and the way that they vote. So how do you measure that? You can't really measure it, is the answer, and they're gonna probably find the same answer with China influencing our elections. So really, really sad to see that this may have impacted the election, but glad it might be something that's getting resolved in the typical Ford fashion. They are moving forward with an appeal, and As Marit Stiles, who's leader of the NDP opposition, says, when they trample on the democratic rights of Ontarians, they are going to lose, and they are going to lose again and again. And it's time they got the message and stopped wasting millions of dollars that could be spent elsewhere. So yeah, every time they lose these court appeals, they just go back to the table. They're taking this to the Supreme Court this time to make sure that they can have complete confirmation that they can trample on some democratic rights and freedoms that we have in Ontario. So this is an article from Toronto Star. Usually we stick to Globe and Mail during this, but I would like to kind of like diversify moving forward. It's more just like a time thing for me. Like how much news can I really ingest from different sources? But in the future, if you would like to support the channel, maybe this is something that can happen. If you ever have an article that you would like to be featured on the show, you can join our Discord and share it there. I'll do my best to get to it. So this is from Toronto Star, Stephanie Levitz of the Ottawa Bureau. Why Pierre Poilievre is firing racism charges back at Justin Trudeau and sticking up for controversial Tory MPs. So if you do remember, we've been covering this story quite a bit. Three conservative MPs met with a neo-Nazi and had lunch and took some photo ops. And Pierre Poilievre even disparaged this woman, Christine Anderson from Germany, who is Nazi adjacent at the very least, saying that her comments were racist and questionable. Now, the MPs have pushed back, of course, throwing some mud at Justin Trudeau, saying that, hey, this is a man who has worn blackface several times in his past. And yes, that is horrible. I hate that Justin Trudeau did that. I hate that conservatives can bring this up and use it against him every time that they do something racist. But that doesn't mean that you don't take accountability for your own racism. You know, it's not, you can't, just because somebody else was racist, and had a incident where they were racist, it doesn't give you suddenly the power to also be racist. You know, unfortunately, that's not how it works, and we always see this positioning from the Conservative Party when they get called out on their BS. So here is Pierre Poilievre saying that when asked Monday whether he'd remove the three MPs from his caucus, Pierre Poilievre was blunt. No, he said. I'll tell you this, speaking of caucus, if I ever find out that any of my members of parliament or candidates have dressed up so many times in ugly racist costumes that they can't remember them all, they will be thrown out. So I don't know, that might be more of a Ben Shapiro impression, but I will work on my Pierre Poilievre impression as we move on. So this article attempts to say, hey, why is this happening? Why is Pierre Poilievre doing all of this and throwing mud at Trudeau and simultaneously condemning Christine Anderson, but also standing by his MPs? And the truth is that he's trying to unify the party. So as this goes into here, MP Ed Fast has been someone who was a supporter of longtime rival of Pierre Poilievre, Jean Charest. Not longtime rival, but they were rivals in the election. And so there was a bit of a fracture within the conservative solidarity between people who are perhaps more moderate and people who are perhaps more extreme, especially along social lines. So this is saying that the two men stood together on Monday, which is MP Ed Fast, who's a Legault supporter, Charest supporter, along with Senator Denise Batters, who O'Toole once threw out of caucus to discuss Fast's private member's bill on the medical assistance in dying or MAID. So, essentially, they're trying to repair this fracture in the Conservative Party. However, now that the far right kind of like wing, these three MPs have done this, it's like, oh, they're like kind of like trying to like rip the fracture lines open again as Poilievre is attempting to repair them. So definitely something interesting to see what's going on there. It's always going to be a question until we have an election, how Poilievre is going to simultaneously repair his party, run to the center, and also continue to appeal to his far right base, which is how he kind of came to power within the Conservative Party. Okay. Last story here, of course, something that everyone is talking about is that Trudeau has finally ordered 2 probes into Chinese election interference. Something we've been covering on the channel a lot. There's a lot of pressure. A lot of people are speculating that Justin Trudeau looked at the poll numbers and said to himself, "Oh, maybe I should do something about this." And so it's good to see him, I think, cave to the pressure. Of course, the conservatives and the NDP are saying that he's not going far enough because he has initiated these 2 closed door probes into Chinese election interference that will be reviewed by a special rapporteur after facing growing calls to investigate Beijing's influence activities. So one of the probes is from the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. Ooh, what a mouthful. It's also referred to as NSIOP, NSICOP, NSICOP. They couldn't think of a good acronym for this, I guess. So the controversy here is that this committee reports directly to Justin Trudeau's office, and they will study the interference of the 2019 and 2021 elections. I was gonna say, geez, I was gonna say erections there for a second, but no. We've had just 2 elections, and hopefully many more erections in that time frame. Anyways, he also said that the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency, which is called NSIRA, a bit of a better acronym there, and also oversees RCMP and federal spy agencies, will examine how investigations into Chinese election meddling have been handled. So, of course, opposition parties are highly critical of this because they were calling for a much needed, they say, public inquiry. And Trudeau has resisted those calls. Mr. Trudeau said he would name the special rapporteur in the coming days. A special rapporteur is considered to be an eminent and impartial individual who, in this case, will review the reports from the 2 organizations and make recommendations. Justin Trudeau also said if the recommendation is to launch a public inquiry, then he will abide to those findings. So really kind of interesting development here. We can see all the parties kind of like jockeying for power as this story unfolds. As we know, the polling is really bad. A lot of people think that China did meddle in Canada's elections. For me, I personally don't think so. But hey, we know that the large amount of people in Canada can be easily led astray by sensationalized news, and unfortunately, that is what happened. Mr. Trudeau has asked CSIS to find the whistleblowers, and the RCMP announced Monday that an investigation is now underway into the leaks. So, that is a separate investigation that's going to happen into who's leaking this information. We still don't know, which in my opinion is why we should still be really, really skeptical of all of everything that's come out. The 2 groups here, what are they? And NSIRA, and NSICOP, they are basically able to meet in secret. Actually, they have to meet in secret because they are dealing with highly classified information. So it's not really clear how a public inquiry might even be effective in this case because we're not going to be allowed to know a lot of the information anyways, which is kind of like why this whole thing is like really ridiculous. So of course, Pierre Poilievre here is saying this is a secret committee with secret hearings, secret evidence, and secret conclusions, all controlled by the Prime Minister. Now, that is a little hyperbolic. They're not controlled by the Prime Minister. In one of the cases, they report to the Prime Minister. So I don't know. Obviously, Pierre Poilievre has his own intentions of fear mongering off of this. He said in a statement on Monday. Pierre Poilievre said in a statement on Monday, it will have neither the openness nor the independence to give Canadians the truth about Beijing's interference in our politics and government. And I mean, unfortunately, the truth is that, well, they didn't really meddle that much more than like any other country meddles in anyone's elections. So I don't know. To me, again, it's a giant nothing burger, but it's the most exciting nothing burger that we're talking about right now in Canadian politics. Pierre Poilievre also said that the special rapporteur is handpicked by the prime minister, and whatever, they're going to be in the prime minister's pocket. I don't know. It's just like we don't even know who they picked yet. So I guess we'll just have to find out. NDP House Leader Peter Julian said in a statement that the Prime Minister's announcement falls short of what is needed, citing the fact that NSICOP holds its meetings in secret. But again, they're either going to have secret meetings or they're going to have public meetings about secrets that they are not going to be allowed to talk about publicly and we're not going to be allowed to know about. So I honestly don't even know if I care, because either it's going to be a secret or a public secret, and it's like it okay, yeah, like that's about it. So the communist oh wait, oh yeah, this was pretty funny. Pierre Poilievre said the communist dictatorship in Beijing has been helping the prime minister. They gave $200,000 in donations to the Trudeau Foundation. They interfered in 2 successive elections to help the Liberals win, and the prime minister knew about it. Mr. Poilievre told the House he has done absolutely nothing to stop it because he benefits from it. And there might be some truth to that goodness, why do they have to all share the same names? Justin Trudeau might have been quicker to act if this was something that was benefiting the Conservative Party, and the Conservatives probably would have been slower to act. But it's not like Justin Trudeau is telling China that a liberal minority is going to be good for them. That's China's own calculation. And in a way, great that they don't see a conservative majority as the thing that's going to benefit them the most. Otherwise, we might see some like very potentially dangerous results of our election being interfered with, as much as China is interfering with it. So tell me what you think about any of these articles. There was a comment yesterday saying that Globe and Mail sensationalizes all their news, and I mean, to some degree that probably is true. If you think that any of these stories has been particularly sensationalized, let me know in the comments. I'm not a big enough channel yet, so I can actually take the time to read all the comments. So thank you so much for tuning in to the daily news, headlines, and hot takes with my homie Tutaro. If you're a fan and you've made it this far, you can like and subscribe. If you want, you can even support the channel on Ko-Fi, which takes no cuts. And we really appreciate you being here, and I hope you are enjoying my goal to make the Canadian news a little more interesting. I am trying my best. It is hard though, and there is a reason why so many Canadians end up talking about American news, but we're trying to keep it all Canadian here. So we really appreciate you, and we hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow.